I got to interview Jason Barnard, the guy that gets Google's algorithms better than almost anyone, knows exactly what Google wants. I was introduced to him because everyone said, if you really want to know how Google operates, this is literally like possibly the best guy in the world for this. So fascinating conversation about how podcasters specifically can use this. He runs a software called Calicube. So here's how Calicube works. It pretty much has two steps. Number one, you need to be able to take what you already have out there on Google and ignore all the fluff and all the irrelevant pieces and focus on just things that you want to be famous for. For example, if I used to play, basketball back in high school, and then I later went on to be a motorcycle racer, and then I have a traveling blog, but I want to be famous as a marketer or a podcaster, that's step one of what he does, is that he helps people kind of take all the stuff that's not really relevant. I understand that he still feeds it in certain ways, but primarily we just ignore the noise and focus on here's what you want to be famous for. And then the second step of what he does, and this is really crazy, is that he takes your peers. So for example, let's say that I want to be the next Gary Vaynerchuk, right? Well, Gary V has so much content. And what he's really done is that there was a giant maze for how to be famous, and Gary V just explored every possible path. He just covered all the territory at once. And what Calicube is doing is it's showing people the exact roadmap of here's how you navigate this maze so you don't make any wrong turns, and you just get exactly where you want to be. So every single turn along the way is precise. And what they do is they give you a list of different things. Okay, so number one, do this. Number two, do this. And specifically it's saying things like, hey, make a Facebook post. Number two, get an article published on this website. And what's cool is this isn't even just about Google. It also redirects back towards your audience and tells them essentially what he can do is find out what your audience is looking for as well. So you can package something so that your audience loves it. You know exactly what they're hungry for. And you also know exactly what Google's hungry for. And you're kind of spoon feeding them exactly what it needs in order to make you become the top guy up on Google. So very fascinating episode. He talks about the strategy along the way. He talks about kind of his path to becoming, understanding all this information. Super excited for you all to listen to this. Let's dive in. Welcome to Reach. This is a show for podcasters who are not only trying to grow an amazing show, but they actually want to make money. I'm excited to share with you the secrets that I've learned along the way, as well as introduce you to some amazing guests who are going to really help you take your show to the next level. I'm your host, Brunson Smith. Let's dive in. All right, crew, welcome back to another episode on Reach. I am so excited to introduce Jason to you all. What is the nickname we came up with for you, Jason? Was it the Google Goat? Is that what we decided?
It was. That was Alex Sanfilippo, and somebody came to me and said, "Oh, I hear you're the Google Goat," and I actually didn't know what goat meant until somebody said Alex Sanfilippo said it. I thought he's insulting me. Turns out it's greatest of all time. So
exactly,
it's very, very flattering. Thank you, Alex.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, the Google Goat. So in short, I think that we could say probably a pretty punchy statement is that Jason has a very specific set of skills that allow people to be famous on Google because he can kind of essentially just kind of hack their algorithm, right? I mean, it's a pretty cool process. So
yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for over 25 years. I started SEO in the year that Google started. So I started with Google. I've grown up with Google. Google haven't particularly noticed that I've been there, but I've been, as you say, hacking, manipulating Google for 25 years with great success. And my special skill today is particularly amplifying personal brand and company brands and podcast brands, for that matter, above and beyond their true status, making you look more famous than you actually are.
I love that. And that's when we chatted actually at this podcasting conference. I said, this is not only super cool, but kind of one of those hidden gems that I think that one of these days, Jason will be too busy to meet with all of us. But I think that's where things are going. Yes, it's amazing to have a really cool list. It's amazing to have a big podcast following, but there is an entire world behind these search engines, and being able to
Yeah.
tap into that is critical. So before you got into Calicube and Google, give us kind of what was kind of the lead up to this? Do you have a background in IT? Do you have a background in any of these skill sets?
Well, no, like many people, I think, or many people, a lot of people I have met in the industry who are really good at manipulating, beating the Google game, however you want to call it, come from a musical background, which is initially quite surprising. Number one is because musicians generally don't make a very good living, and it's really easy for a musician to say, well, I can see that in SEO there's a living to be made. And the similarities between music and SEO, which is it takes structure. There are rules to music, and you have the notes, and there are beats, there are keys, and so there are lots of rules that you need to follow, but you will only be truly great if you're creative. And
Hmm.
that approach really makes sense. There's a guy called Marty Weintraub, who's a musician like me, and we had a huge long conversation at a conference once about what the parallels are between musicianship and SEOs, and we found quite a lot. And if you want to listen to that, Branded Search and Beyond, which is my podcast, Marty Weintraub, have a look for that episode, and it's brilliant. He's such a delightful guy. We were sitting on the floor in the corridor, PubCon in Las Vegas, which sounds really cool now I say it.
That's awesome. And so that was kind of this initial spark of like, okay, you had the creativity, you had the background. Now, remind me, I remember you saying something about even a cartoon series. Was that right?
That's how it started. Yeah, and 100% is my wife and I created cartoon characters. I made a music album, and we couldn't get it published.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm very determined, I decided that I would create a website using Flash, Macromedia Flash at the time, then Adobe Flash, and now it doesn't exist anymore. But it was an animation tool. So I learnt to do animation online, streaming over, at the time, 14K modems. So it was very, very slow internet connections with these two cartoon characters singing songs and creating games for them. And it was a lot of fun. We launched in the same year as Google. And at the time, search engine optimization was about creating one page for each keyword variant and for each search engine. And because there were 15 or 16 decent search engines, you would be creating hundreds of thousands of pages. And that was a huge problem. So what I then did is say, I will focus just on Google. So I bet on Google when it was one of the smallest search engines to become one of the biggest. And my bet turned out to be either very lucky or very smart and perceptive, depending on how you want to look at it.
So this wasn't just, you didn't just take a dart and throw it at a board and say, oh, Google. I mean, there was a
No,
lot of research, a lot of prediction. You were watching the signs and you said, okay, the writing's on the wall for Google. Were you
I
pretty
would like to
confident that
say
it was
there was a,
Google?
yeah, well, I would like to say it was a lot of research, but it actually wasn't. As I start, because to explain a little bit, the website was in the day when AOL was huge and the
Mm,
internet bubble was huge. And we had a website, we were trying to attract people to this kids' website. We got lots of press, we got awards, we got schools recommending us. But what we realized very quickly is the search engines would be the place where we would get the most traffic. But not in the short term, because right at the beginning, the search engines weren't the best way to get people to your website. Recommendations on school websites and PR and getting awards, and lots of people had their own little sites that would then
hmm
say, I recommend this, and this. And it was very much personal recommendations. So it was social media before social media. And search
hmm
engines were good, but they weren't the huge behemoth that they are today. And as I said, there were 16 of them. And it was very clear from the beginning that Google was smarter and that we had an advantage on Google because everybody was recommending us naturally. So we got all the links that Google was looking for. And the other search engines weren't looking for links. They were just looking for keywords in pages. So Google brought together keywords and links, which we now think is obvious. But at the time of
Right.
Google, it was new. And from my perspective, I looked at it and thought, I have a huge advantage on Google. Google is obviously better than the others. I'm taking the bet.
Hmm. That's, yeah, I think you're right. Either very lucky, but I've maybe seen not luck on that one. That seems like that was a very well educated or at least good intuition or something. I mean, that was I mean, they've been the clear winner.
Intelligence is being intellectually capable of understanding or explaining something. So that will be what you would get when you do a degree or a doctorate.
Hmm.
Smart intelligence is using that intelligence in a day-to-day, helpful, useful, valuable, powerful manner. So it's taking that intelligence and applying it to the real world and making something happen. So smart intelligence is one of the key concepts we have at Calicube. We've got 20 people on the team, and one thing that everybody has to have is smart intelligence. That's how you survive at Calicube. Oh,
I
and
remember we
talking
had
of
that
survival,
conversation.
we have a meeting every week with the whole team, and one of the people, everyone shares their highlight of the week. And somebody who's been on the team for 6 months now, Marielle, said, "My highlight of the week is I survived another week at Calicube." And she didn't mean it in a bad way. She meant it's such an exciting ride, building this whole industry that nobody else has ever done before, and getting from one end of the week, Monday, to the other end, Friday, and still being here and still working and still seeing things working out is a huge achievement in and of itself.
That's amazing. And it really is. I mean, I just don't know anyone that's quite taking this approach. We have SEO. For those that are listening, how would you describe the difference between what Calicube is doing and your standard SEO approach?
I like that question. That's a great question because people meet me and immediately think that I'm going to get them to the top of Google for something like best podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And that my aim will be to create a page that talks about best podcasts and puts them at the top. But that's not what we do. That's what SEOs try to do. And increasingly, that's something that's no longer possible. Not by simply creating a web page that addresses that specific question in isolation. What we do is take a brand, a podcast, in this case, a podcast
Mm-hmm.
name, the marketing for that podcast, which would be the episodes themselves, and also the social media activity, any articles about them, the website itself. And we
Mm-hmm.
package all of that, both for the audience and also for Google. So we're looking at branding, marketing, and SEO in that order. SEO is simply the packaging of the branding and marketing you're doing anyway. You package that branding and the marketing for Google. And that's the secret to SEO today. And wonderfully, delightfully, it's actually the secret to building any kind of business or podcast audience, is that you focus on the branding and the marketing for your audience, being where your audience is looking, showing them that you have the right solution, and inviting them in. And if you can then package that for Google and demonstrate to Google that you have the right answer for the audience when they're looking for it, and that you serve that audience in the way that they need to be served to answer the question they have or solve the problem they have, Google will reward you because it will see that you're satisfying the subset of its users who are your audience. It's as simple as that.
Interesting. So all the SEO is doing is that they're doing some of the right stuff. They're just missing, their one piece of the puzzle. And that one piece
And
is
the
not
one piece of
sufficient to really succeed anymore.
Yeah, and the one piece of the puzzle they're missing is this actually should be for the people who you're trying to serve. And if you
Yeah.
focus on that, you're building a great business or a great brand with great marketing materials. And Google then becomes the bonus, which is, I think, where the podcasting world is coming from. And that's why the podcasting world is probably more receptive to what I'm saying, because they're
Right.
saying, well, my principal aim is not Google. I already have all these podcasting platforms. I already have my social media. I have people listening to my podcast. Google, nice to have, not necessary. I agree with them. If you
Yeah.
can build your audience elsewhere, but then you can package for Google, it becomes the bonus, and it's a nice to have that you then get naturally, and you don't need to do any extra work or effort beyond packaging.
So why would people not just go to Google experts to learn about how to hack this Google system? Why do they have, what makes you unique in that space?
I think the answer to that question is exactly what you said, is the Google SEO experts are missing the huge piece, which is real people.
Yeah.
They will tend to focus on the machine and not think about the people who are the ultimate audience, and that Google is simply trying to match the audience to the supplier, the person with the problem to the person with the solution, or the company with the solution. And that Google is simply an interface between them. Nothing more and
Mm-hmm.
nothing less. It's two people coming together with a problem and a solution with Google being the interface, that we're asking simply to recommend us as the best solution. So if you focus
Yeah.
on the person on the other side and what you're giving to them, and then think, how do I convince this machine to recommend me as the best solution over and above my competition? Then you've solved the SEO problem and the business problem or the audience building problem.
Super. It's just fascinating. It's just so fascinating.
Yeah.
Just such a different approach to SEO or that SEO space generally.
And it's all a bit philosophical, and I think kind of that's where I often fall down, is everyone's saying that it sounds brilliant, but what do I do?
Hmm.
And that's where the crux comes, is I don't always leave people with an incredibly simple list of things that they can do. And I can do that now much more easily since talking people like yourself at the Podfest. I
Hmm.
realized that I was talking about something that was very philosophical, very important, with an original approach that allows anybody to do this. But
Yeah.
I didn't actually tell people this is what you do.
Yeah. Well, and I'd like to actually kind of dive in and take a case study and say, okay, you're a podcaster with, I don't know, you've been doing it for a year or so, you've got a lot of content out. Before we dive into that whole scenario, I want to maybe put a little plug in here, and you can correct me if I have this wrong. Wasn't there someone at Google who is pretty in the know, maybe even helped write some of those algorithms, that said that you knew more about Google algorithms than he did? Is that, am I misquoting that?
It's a slight misquote, but yes, it was for Google. All of this is just algorithms. Outside of Google, I'm the person who knows the most about how to actually educate these algorithms, because that's what I do. Is that the algorithms are trying to learn about you, about your services, about your audience, and about your credibility. And what I can do is feed these algorithms with the information they need so that they learn about who you are, what you do, which audience you serve, and then why you're the most credible solution for the subset of its users who are your audience. And there's a huge difference between building an algorithm that has an aim of doing something and being able to control how that algorithm then understands what's going on in the world, which is what I do. So what he was simply saying is, we build algorithms with an aim. Jason's coming from the aim the other way and getting the algorithm to dance to his own tune. And so it's not I know more than they do, it's that I have a completely different approach by
Yeah.
necessity, because I can't affect the algorithm. I
Yeah.
can do, I can't affect the way the algorithm is built or how it works. What I can do is influence what it sees and how it digests it. And that allows me then to influence very heavily how it understands and how it represents us.
It's fascinating. And so, and my understanding was that you really are considered, at least by this guy's perspective, you were the best. I mean, you were the name that
Yeah.
apparently he came up with. And it was like, yeah, if you want to know how to educate the algorithms, there's really one guy. There's really
Yeah,
one guy. And
that's
that's why,
exactly
and
it.
that's why Alex, when he spoke to me about you, he said, yeah, he's the Google goat. Like, I mean, even Google says that he's the goat when it comes to understanding
Yeah.
how to educate the algorithms on how to make you. And that's really what was fascinating to me, was this concept of, we can take someone who is not famous but has some content and make them look like they're the top of their particular, not maybe not always the number one in their field, but we can make them jump not just one or two steps, but quite a few steps up that social ladder and seem like they're very successful when it comes to how Google will present them to the world. And that was really fascinating to me.
Yeah, well, I think actually there are multiple aspects to this. I mean, the first one is, how does your audience perceive you? The second
Hmm.
is, how does Google perceive you? And the third is, how does Google represent you? And if you start with the audience, if you have an incredibly clear, consistent message across every place that they interact with you, on your website, on social media, on your podcast, on other people's podcasts, in PR, in the media, when you write an article, then you are going to engage that audience or those people in a way that makes sense to them and makes sense to you and brings you closer together if you're a relevant solution for them. Then Google's perception of you is the way that we then take that first part, package it for Google. So Google's perception of you is then that you are one of the best in market.
Hmm.
And the point is that if somebody else next to you has exactly the same quality content, let's say better content, with perhaps more audience and more PR, but they're not organizing it in a way that makes sense. Number one, the audience won't be impacted as heavily and as completely, as in my case. But number two, Google won't see it in the same way. So what you actually effectively do by reorganizing your entire digital ecosystem, your branding and your marketing that you're presenting to the audience, is amplifying what you have, both in the minds of your audience and in the mind of Google. And when you amplify what you have in the mind of Google, what it represents you as when somebody searches your podcast name or your name on Google will be significantly more sexy, let's say. So if you search
Yeah.
my name, Jason Barnard, JASONBARNARD, you will see lovely cards at the top with my age, my partner's name, the social media, some photos, then a description, then that I created Buwan Kuala, my birth date, who my mother is, and then some famous people from the marketing industry underneath. People also search for Rand Fishkin, let's say. Joost de Valk, who created one of the great WordPress plugins. The fact there is not that I'm famous or so famous that Google would represent me in a way that's just as rich, information rich and sexy as somebody like Johnny Depp.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not famous like Johnny Depp, but Google understands so much about me that it's willing to show all of this information as though I was famous as Johnny Depp. So it's that trick that you can play on Google when somebody's searching your name. But the truth is, to get Google to play that trick, I had to convince Google that I was serving my audience, and I'm serving my audience in an incredibly focused manner and making sure that Google understands it every step of the way. So my personal brand is very well represented both to my audience and to Google. And to give an idea of how that works with Calicube, my company, and myself, when people come for a sales talk with me, they say every time I research knowledge panels, educating Google, amplifying personal brand, building a future-proof digital marketing strategy, I see that red shirt and I see your name and I see Calicube absolutely everywhere. And they don't mean
Yeah.
just on Google. They mean on LinkedIn. They mean on Facebook. They mean on Twitter. They mean search engine land. They mean on Forbes.com. And then they double check on Google, which is an interesting point that I'd never thought of. They say, I looked you up on Google at the end just to double check that Google agrees. And that is key. We trust Google. We use Google because we trust Google.
Right.
People will research you on Google and your topic on Google to double check that Google agrees with what we've seen on the rest of the web. And of course, if you've organized everything on the rest of the web, Google will definitely agree. So you're creating your own truth from a set of facts, but the truth is amplified.
It's just so interesting. And if any of you are listening at home right now, go ahead and search his name like he spelt it out and just see what Google pops up. And during our conversation, that's what I found very fascinating, is that I pulled up your name and it was like, holy smokes, you look like a celebrity,
Yeah.
right? Like it was it was just like that. It's like, it looked like Johnny Depp or anything else where, yes, I wasn't seeing 15 movies you've been in, but Google showed me this fancy, card system and it made it look like, yeah, I mean, it just gave me a ton of information based on a single name. And I'm like, oh, I'm sure there's other Jason Barnards out there, right? But there's only one that's relevant to Google. Because, I mean, that's all that I saw.
Right. No, 100%. And I haven't been in 15 movies. I've done one TV series that was also a website. That's all I need to look as famous as Johnny Depp. I don't need an entire career. I just need one
Right.
TV series. But I also would need just one book, or I would need 15 guest appearances on podcasts. That would do it. You don't need a great deal to build a huge personal brand on Google in the sense, you don't need a huge number of appearances or fame or, big events for Google to represent you in a way that makes you look like you've done a lot more than you have. And the mistake I see a lot of people making is immediately saying, I want to build my personal brand, coming in and saying, I need more PR. And they go more. And you're saying, no, you need to start with organize what you've got and then build the right additional PR, which is another thing that we do really well, is figure out where you need to stand to be standing where your audience is looking. And I failed to say this earlier on, Google tells us what we need to know. We're not making it up. We're not saying, oh, I think it might be Facebook, or I think it might be Forbes.com. For me as an entrepreneur, we take what we call entity equivalence, which is who do you want to emulate? Who are your peers, the people on the step above you? So I would take entrepreneurs on the step above me at Calicube, and I would put them into the Calicube Pro system, which is a SaaS platform that I built. And it would just spit out the places that I need to push: Facebook, YouTube, get onto Forbes.com, get onto Entrepreneur Magazine, get myself listed on theorg.com,
Hmm.
Crunchbase. And a lot of people think, well, all of this is really obvious. So yeah, you can probably guess most of it. You'll probably guess 60% of it, but there's 40% you won't guess. But the other point is you're always guessing, and we're not. We're asking Google, out of these 70 people, what are the commonalities in terms of press, in terms of social media, in terms of websites, in terms of presence online? And it will tell us the commonalities. And we say, well, this is what you need to focus on by order of priority, based on the data that Google is showing us, is the best representation of this peer group. So you can actually start with what you've got, build that out, make yourself look better than you already are, one step up, let's say. Then you can look at the people who are on that one step up, focus on what they're doing, what's common, the commonality between them based on data, get those press mentions, those places, focus on those social media platforms, and move yourself up another step. Then you can do that again and again and again. And you move step by step to the top of the ladder and become the authority, the credible source, the trusted source within your industry.
Interesting. So, as an example, right? So, if I'm a podcaster who specializes in entrepreneurship and marketing, and what you're probably going to look at is someone like, let's just say, to throw a name out there, Gary Vaynerchuk, right? Who is a huge name in that space, and go, okay, how do I make people look more like Gary Vaynerchuk? And then you're going to actually have a list that says, okay, first get a TikTok maybe, or make sure you get an article published here, get this or get that. And then just start moving down a list that'll help you appear, even if you're not nearly as famous as Gary Vee, but appear as though you were when it comes to Google's research of you. Because you can just feed it exactly what it wants to eat.
Yeah, that's it. Give Google exactly what it wants to eat. What it wants to eat is actually what the audience is looking for anyway. So you're serving both. Once again, the audience and Google
Right.
are getting exactly what they need. And you're getting in the front of the right people at the right places without even thinking about Google or the Google search results. You're just asking Google, where do I need to stand to be standing where my audience is looking when they have the problem that I can solve?
Yeah.
And Google will tell you. And you gave the example of Gary Vee. If you just look at him, then you'll be templating Gary Vee. And what works for Gary Vee doesn't work for Neil Patel, doesn't work for Joost de Valk, doesn't work for Cindy Crum, doesn't work for Andrea Volpini, all of these different people who are entrepreneurs in the marketing space.
Mm-hmm.
What we do is take 70 of these people and ask Google for all 70. And then my algorithm, what I call templates it, but it actually just analyzes the whole thing. It says, what are the common features of all of these people? Where are most of them standing? So it might not be TikTok. Even if it works for Gary Vee, it doesn't work for the group of people that Gary Vee belongs to.
Right.
It might be LinkedIn, it might be Facebook. We don't know.
Which would be hilarious to find out. Just as an example, it'd be hilarious to find out that Gary Vee, maybe it's like he spends 80% of his time on TikTok, only to find out that's not what Google's hungry for, nor his audience. Instead, he needs to be publishing some obscure article in org.com, or the Entrepreneur Magazine. It's like, oh, that's what his audience and Google's hungry for, is this little tiny thing right here. So we have misapplied energy constantly. And I think that's why I believe a lot of podcasters don't bother with anything to do with their Google presence, is it just feels overwhelming. And just generally producing content feels so overwhelming because, okay, do I publish on LinkedIn? Okay, I've already got a podcast, but okay, we've got LinkedIn, YouTube. I mean, the list is endless and it feels so overwhelming and exhausting. On top of the fact you have to repackage everything for each platform because, yes, you can copy and paste, but TikTok does not like Reels and Reels don't like TikTok, for example. And so you have to go and like, okay, well, which one matters more? I don't really know. And you're just guessing. And that's what was so fascinating about our conversation was like, oh, we can just remove some of that guesswork and know what Google's hungry for and say, oh yeah, boom, 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 boom. And all of a sudden you just exploded up the charts, not because you have omnipresence everywhere, but because you have very specific data that's being put in place and it's exactly what Google's looking for. Yeah, so that's just super fascinating.
Well, one question all our clients ask when they come is, which social media platform should I be focusing on? And they come in and say, I've got 6 social media platforms. So we'll include YouTube in that: TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. And you say, well, you don't need to focus on all five. You don't have the resources. Let's cut it down to three. Which are the three most important for this particular peer group or this particular market segment? Just focus on those because they're the ones that will move the needle. And the interesting point about, let's say, Gary Vee working on TikTok, he's pushing, I mean, I don't know exactly what he's doing, but if he's pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing on TikTok, he says, well, this is working for me, so that's fine. As you rightly say, there might be a way to remove some of the resources from that and put it into Facebook and get more traction from Facebook because that was the missing piece from his overall puzzle within his market segment. And I'll give you an example for myself is I put a lot of effort into YouTube and it works really well for me. And then one day I realized that I needed an academic article. The academic article doesn't seem valuable from a business perspective to my eyes at first sight. And I think, well, I can't spend 3 days figuring out this academic article because I've got all the YouTube videos I need to make. But once I realized that the data showed me I needed that piece in my puzzle, I took the 3 days out and I created the academic article. I got it published. I'm now gone into Google Scholar. Google loves me more. And I can cite that as a reason for people to believe in my authority because I'm academically accepted as well as being commercially marketing accepted. And it's been a huge part of my overall puzzle. Another example is a book. It took me 6 months to write the book. It took me a lot of time. I knew that a book was missing a missing piece from my overall marketing and personal branding puzzle, made the book, and it hasn't made me money from selling the book. It's made me money from placing me as an authority so that when people come to me, they say, well, you've written this book, you must be the guy.
Yeah. Well, and this goes back to some of the basics of marketing. I mean, one of the first lessons I ever learned as a marketer was it's not about having $1 million idea. It's about having $1 million marketing plan. In other words, the issue is that often people build a product without knowing if they can even sell it. I've done this myself. And I'll go build an amazing product, just like writing a book, right? Only to find out that maybe that's not what you should have done in the first place. Maybe it was TikTok. Maybe it was Facebook. And knowing first that you can quote unquote sell the product or publish something that's going to actually move the needle is pretty valuable when it comes to where you apply your time and energy. Because that's pretty finite. And I can tell you, and you probably talk to entrepreneurs all day, and I do as well, that are going, it's a lot. It's overwhelming. I've got 27 different places to publish and write a book and make a TV show. And it's like, okay, do I even know that any of these are going to move the needle? Well, I'm hoping, and I'm just shotgunning everywhere, hoping that one of these BBs is going to hit. And so, yeah, I do. I mean, I think that's spot on. It's knowing the product beforehand that needs to be published before you go even make it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the idea of we have limited resources, limited time, limited money, make sure that you're not pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing on something that isn't bringing the massive incremental value that you think. I mean, I studied economics back in the day. The law of diminishing returns is something that has always stuck with me, is that you always kick off with something and it will give you immense returns at the start. And how fast that law of diminishing returns hits in is vastly important to how you then handle what you're doing. So if you keep focusing on one thing, each iteration of it, each additional step that you do will bring less value. How much less value is the thing you need to focus on? And at what point does that drop in value of the next step not come up to what you would get if you then put that effort into a new project or a new idea or a new marketing plan? So when I was focusing on YouTube, I got to the point where each additional video didn't bring as much value as sitting down and writing a book or writing an academic article would bring me. And I wouldn't have known which to focus on first, or indeed which to focus on, without the peer group analysis that we did at CaliCube, which is one of the services we offer.
It's awesome. Looks like we're about time. So quick wrap up here. You didn't pay me to come to talk about this. I just truly believe I'm always trying to offer value to my audience and say, hey, listen, if I find an amazing resource, I want you guys to know Jason and I are going to be working together in the future. And I wanted to bring him on the show just so everyone can know about this, because I think that this is the kind of stuff that, again, we're in such a rapidly expanding world. The law of diminishing return is more real than it ever has been. Information is going to be, I think, doubling in 24 hours in the next, 10 years or something. It's like, if we are not really specifically applying our efforts and energy in the right places, we get outmoded by things that are, including AI. And so just a very relevant thing. If people are trying to connect with you and trying to see if, okay, this is the right place, I have 2 questions for this and we'll wrap up. Number 1, where do they need to be on their journey? Could they have just started a podcast? Can they be a veteran? So maybe tell us where they need to be on the journey. And then number 2, how they can find you and connect to see if this is the right fit.
Right. Yeah, that's the first one is a really good question in the sense that nobody ever asks me that, and I've never really thought about it. But if you're a beginner or you're just starting out in your journey, we're not going to be a good solution. You need to create assets. You need something there for us to be helpful and useful and for it to be worth you paying us to help you with this. So you can start off on your own, build it up, use the free resources on kalicube.com, KALICUBE.com. We give everything away for free. So you just have to read the stuff, take the time to read it, and it's all valuable, it's all helpful. And you can start off on your own. Once you've got assets and once you've got a certain level of notoriety, of notability, famousness, and you have a presence out there, then we come in and clean it up, join all the dots, make it all neat and tidy, make sure everything is incredibly clear, consistent, and relevant to your audience. And then we can start building up from there. But if you're already a big hitter, a big player, come to us now because, and clients hate to hear this, your digital ecosystem is a mess. However clear and consistent you think you've been, you haven't. You have a team working on it. You've worked on it yourself. Human beings ourselves are not consistent. Teams of human beings are even less consistent. And what we can do is bring it all together, make it all consistent, join all the dots. And as I said, joining the dots makes sense to your audience all the way down the funnel, all the way across your digital ecosystem. So you're speaking the same language to them across every touch point. And that makes sense to human beings. We like consistency from people. Makes sense to Google. Google will see that you're doing this. It will see, it will understand, it will see that you're serving your audience, and it will then represent you in the way you want when people search your name. But more than that, Google is now moving from being a search engine to an answer engine to an assistive engine, where it's helping people to understand what they're looking for. You don't need to know what you're looking for. Google will help you figure it out. And at that point, if Google understands who you are, who you serve, and what you offer them, then it can match you by recommending you proactively to the people using Google. And that is going to be the key to the future. So that's a little teaser for what's coming next. But right now, you want Google to push you and your brand when people already know it. So your traditional, if I may, marketing strategies off Google are going to play hugely into that. People will then search your name. Then you're going to look great to them. And when you look great to them, it means that you're already doing a great job. And it's a wonderful virtuous circle. And now I'll tell you where you can find me is you search for me on Google, JASON BARNARD, or my company, Kalicube, KALICUBE, and you'll find us and you can decide how you want to engage with us. Do you just want to chat on LinkedIn? Do you want to follow us on Twitter? Do you want to come to our website and use the free resources? Do you want to contact us, book a meeting with me, learn about my life as a cartoon blue dog? It's up to you. I'm giving the people searching my name or my company name the options of how they want to engage with me by telling them to search for me on Google. And I get a really, really lovely bonus from this. Every time somebody searches my name or Kalicube's name on Google, Google gives us one small little brownie point more because Google sees that we're popular.
Yeah.
It sees that we're famous. So building branded search, i.e. the number of people who search for your name, you or your company or your podcast, as you build that up, you build Google's understanding and appreciation of how important you are. The more important you are to Google, or in Google's eyes, the more it will promote you, the more it will recommend you, the bigger presence you'll get on Google. It's a really neat, simple hack. Get as many searches on your name as you possibly can.
That's awesome. Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing that wisdom. Folks, like you just said, very easy to find him. And every time you search him, that's just another little bonus for Kalicube. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot, Brunson. That was brilliant.
Thank you for listening to another episode. I'm so grateful for your support. If anything on this show was valuable to you, I have one huge ask. That's just share it with your friends. And if you have a little extra time, go ahead and leave me a review. That's my big ask for you guys. We'll see you on the next episode.